Mary Lawless Lee is a mother, writer, entrepreneur, and digital media personality dedicated to living creatively, chasing curiosity, and exploring the world through the lens of fashion, family, travel, and design. Happily Grey, her now iconic fashion and lifestyle blog, amassed a following of over 2 million and serves as a loving space for readers to connect with Mary's stories and their own. She's also the founder of Happily Grey Boutique and Nēmah, a self-care and skincare line for mothers. Her new book, Happily Grey: Stories, Souvenirs, and Everyday Wonders from the Life in Between, released on November 15th. It covers growing up in the South, Mary's first career as an ICU nurse, her marriages, her journey to motherhood, and much more, all while providing readers with the pearls she discovered along the way. Let's welcome Mary to the show. Mary, it's such a pleasure to have you on the show, a mom of soon-to-be 3, a fashion icon. You have your Happily Grey Boutique, your new book, you have Nēmah. I mean, we're juggling a lot. So I am so thankful that we could find a time to put you on the podcast and learn all about your life and your new book. So thanks for being here.
I'm so excited to be here. So thankful to be a part of the conversation today and really looking forward to it.
Oh, well, I feel like you were like one of the first big, huge fashion bloggers out there. Can you talk about like your upbringing and what led you to the fashion world and blogging in general?
Yeah, for sure. So my story starts in East Texas. I'm from a very small town in the middle of nowhere, which was really beautiful and dreamy as a child. I was raised on a farm, 500 acres. We had like 7 ponds. I grew up fishing, running through the fields. I mean, I'm not kidding. It was literally like the summers. My brother and I would play outdoors from like 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. We'd run in for lunch, or sometimes my mom would we'd make it on the go. But yeah, so that's my background is Texas and living on a farm. And I went to school at UT Austin and studied nursing. I always knew I was going to be a caretaker in some way, of some sorts. I had a heart for it and a great passion for it. I actually thought I was going to work with babies because I've dreamt of being a mom my whole life, and I love little babies. And I finished nursing school, and I walk into critical care, neonatal ICU, and I literally walked right out. The environment was 100% not for me. I love babies, but like taking care of sick babies, I just didn't realize. And so I quickly transferred to cardiovascular ICU, and I worked with adults in cardiac, and I loved it. I worked as a nurse for 7 years in the Texas Medical Center, and then secondly at Vanderbilt. And it just was the most 7 impressionable years of my life. Nursing taught me so much, true grit and true gratitude. And so much of what I now am in this digital media world. And so much of that I've taken with me and applied to this new business. But I've always had this creative outlet kind of passion within me around styling and fashion. And so when I was a nurse, nurses work 3 days on, 4 days off. And so I had this time on my hands, and I've always journaled. I've always written since I was a little girl. Like when I would go to bed when I was like 8 years old, I would stay up and write. And journaling's always been a big part it's always been a meditation for me, a big part of my mental health. And so I paid my friend $50. This was 10 years ago. Paid him $50 to create happilygray.com. And there's a lot of meaning behind that name. And I set on this kind of creative outlet, and I was going to write about fashion in my spare time. And what started as just, truly an organic passion project turned into now 3 different businesses. And I no longer work in nursing. So it was a slow evolution, but it also was at the point where Pinterest and Instagram were launching. They hadn't yet launched. And so I slowly kind of wandered into this digital world unplanned. And, with some luck and then some strategy behind it, quickly learning that this was a whole new world that we were entering into of influencer marketing. And I started to kind of grow a community and connect with that community around fashion, and then ultimately a full lifestyle brand. And most recently, we opened a store here in Nashville called Shop Happily Grey in West Nashville. I have a team of 9 women, and we a year ago, launched my skincare brand, Nēmah, which is a postpartum pregnancy and postpartum skincare brand for women. And yeah, it's just been the adventure of a lifetime. These last 10 years, I couldn't have like painted this story, but it's been a lot of hard work, a lot of learning, a lot of trial and error. But I really am so appreciative and thankful for my upbringing and my background, because I really feel like that's given me the tool set to, kind of operate in this entrepreneur world and figuring it out as I go.
Let's talk about, because I love the transition, learning about people's transitions from nursing to full-time entrepreneur, blogger, and now an author, retail store owner, brand owner. I mean, can you talk about that transition? How long it took you? How long were you side hustling Happily Gray? And when did you know it was the right time to take it full-time?
Yeah, so it wasn't overnight, and it wasn't so I was pretty calculated with that decision, and I kind of am in a lot of things in life. I waited until I kind of tag teamed Happily Gray, my blog, and nursing for a good 3.5 years. And I really waited till the numbers kind of made sense, and I was starting to garner more long-term partnerships with brands. So I was seeing more of the longevity in this, and I was beginning to trust the market, because it was really before, this is at the time when some brands were like, influencer marketing, I don't know if that's that impactful, and it's not like it is now, where brands, really trust this outlet to grow brand exposure and revenue. And so it was very calculated. And I took there's a lot of kind of precautions steps prior to really making that leap. But I will say, it was never a question of if I was going to. I just wanted to know on paper that it made sense. But my gut, my intuition always told me, this is where I felt the most alive. This is where I was most excited. Getting that bit of autonomy and being able to really create and kind of have an unpaved path in front of me felt really exciting to me. And that first glimpse of that entrepreneurial world was really enticing. And so I knew it was going to happen. I just needed it to make sense on paper. So it was a slow evolution, and there's a lot of hard work, late nights, a lot of, sweat and tears that went into it before I really made that leap.
I think people have an idea in their mind of what being a blogger of any sort is like, whether it's fashion or food or home, living, lifestyle. I don't think that there's a lot of realization of the strategy, the work ethic, the consistency that needs to go into something like this to be as successful as you've become. Can you talk a little bit about the day-to-day in building your business, and if you had help along the way? Obviously it was 3.5 years before you took it full time, but at what point did you bring on help, and how did you keep track of what you were going to blog about, what you were posting, how often? Did you have like a calendar for something like that, and a plan?
Yeah, so I learned quickly that consistency was the key. With social media, especially early on, you had to be consistent. And so I operated and we still do today. We live and breathe by calendar. Everything is now it's more like bandwidth and teams. But back then it was just, I made a calendar, had it all organized and detailed out. For the first 3 years, it was just me. And it's so funny. I remember I would say like, yeah, we are doing this. I'd be on like calls and I would say we, and then I always referred to we as me and my Great Dane that was at my feet at that time.
Yeah.
Allie and I were the team. But I soon got an assistant, and she started helping me kind of manage the day-to-day, the organization. I headed up like the creative and still the brand partnerships. But once, we kind of got to capacity where I felt like I was losing jobs because I couldn't get to them in time, I hired an agency. And that was really the first infrastructure around my business, was having an agent, a manager. to help manage and vet these jobs, and then also to help go and get the jobs that I really wanted. Like, it's one thing to kind of manage and vet the incoming, but really going and getting what you really want is a whole nother level of growth and getting to those long-term goals. And so that was a big step for me. I was managed by CEA for 6 years. And from there is when that was kind of year five, I would say, I started to really grow my team. I hired an internal brand manager, and then I had a photographer on salary. And so, yeah, as we started working with brands in a more long-term capacity and had just stronger contacts and started working on more design projects, that's when I really started to grow that internal team. But I will say, as a business owner, managing a team and keeping people motivated, keeping people happy, and just excited to be a part of a company that feels inspiring was a huge learning curve for me. That was as a business owner, I'm working on the creative and leading up the creative, but then I also have a whole nother side to my job, which is team management. And so that's been a big learning curve. We actually have a culture coach here at our company that helps with that. And I've learned just as much as how he's serving for my team. I've learned from him as a leader. So that's been tremendously important to have him along in the journey.
Absolutely. I can only imagine just it's like a group vibration that's happening. And you can be so passionate about everything you're putting out and excited about it and wanting to dive into the creative, and your team can feel like untethered if you're not constantly connecting with them and motivating them and getting them excited or having their own autonomy to take charge over something.
Totally. And especially now we have 3 different companies under our kind of umbrella. We have our partnerships, our shop Happily Gray, which is our store, and then our skincare brand Nēmah. And so, but all of our companies work kind of in synergy together. And so just having, someone to kind of help bridge those teams, and it's been a huge, like I said, a huge learning curve, but I think it's the backbone of, and so important as a leader for me to really be able to connect the team and motivate the team. So I've done a lot of personal work in that area on being a strong leader and growing a strong team of women. But I will say, I always find like a lot of people think, influencer world is just, it's all fun and games and it's a pretty picture, but for how much I respect my team, I know how hard they work. I mean, I know how hard I work, yes, but how hard they work. And I always voice that it's a lot of work. There's a lot of behind the scenes that they run from day to day that I'm so thankful for, that I wouldn't be able to do it by myself, because it is, essentially when a brand hires us, we are hired to kind of be we concept the idea, we photograph it, we are the copywriters, we're marketing the product from a 360 approach, and it takes a full team of people to do that, and I'm really proud of all that they put into it.
Definitely. Well, I think what's interesting is what you mentioned earlier too, is this sort of a reach list, or the list of brands once you've grown your audience large enough where you can say, like, these are the brands I want to work with. And these are the brands, whether it's your manager or your agent, going after those deals for you, so that there's even more alignment with who you are and how you want to represent yourself and what brands you want to represent. So how long into your career did you start and have the flexibility and ability to start deciding who you were working with?
Probably 5 years in. It was gradual, but I would say about 5 years in, we started being able to have kind of the infrastructure of long-term partnerships and consistent partnerships, to where we could say, okay, let's now go after what we really want. And I always try to remind my team of, here are our long-term goals. Knowing our long-term goals, what really aligns it, because that's where you find the most success. The brand partnerships that do the best for us are really the ones that are the most authentically aligned to our beliefs, our values as a brand. And so Yeah, about 5 years in. I think it's unrealistic to expect it from the beginning, you know. You kind of have to put in the time and the work and the hustle. And then once you have that foundation and that infrastructure in place, then going and getting, you know, going out to those brands and just hustling and being really just being really bold and saying, you know, kind of saying what you want.
Yeah. How much, I mean, that's a great point because it's manifestation in its own way, just speaking into
Mhm.
existence what you want. So what are some of your favorite brand partnerships, and on average, how long do your deals last?
So we have a mix. So we'll have some that are one-offs that are like, you know, brands will hire us for a grid post and a 3-frame story. And that's kind of how it really started. Now we're seeing, and we do still have that, a mix of that. What my favorite types of deals that I enjoy the most are the 3-month, 6-month, or even a year and a half. And you know, those, I think those take more time to kind of garner, and there's more kind of love and strategy that goes into that because it's a big leap for both sides. But those are my favorite because you really can get into just understanding the brand values and goals more, and you have more time to make the content more authentic. So those are my favorite types of partnerships. I will say the most successful are when, you know, the brands really allow you to come in and be creative and kind of, you know, do your thing as a creative. When brands, you know, can get to like, we need you to do this. Basically, we need you to fit into this box exactly in this way. It's kind of when we feel the most strapped and the hardest to be able to do our job well. Because in a way, social media, the beauty of it is it's organic, right?
Yeah.
And it feel effortless and it should feel authentic and real and honest. And I think when there's a lot of structure and rigidity around it, it's hard to kind of culture that nature of content. But my favorite recently, what we've kind of gotten into the last 3 years is design partnerships, doing small capsule collections or large capsule collections. We started working on capsule collections with brands 4 years ago. Bloomingdale's was our first one where we designed a holiday capsule collection. It's like roughly 50 pieces. And that's really fun because you get to see all aspects of the business. I mean, you're a part of creating the product, and there's a lot of love and creativity that goes into, you know, those initial steps to really build out this full storyline. And those are really fun. We just did one with Splendid last year, and it's exciting because you get to see from start to finish a product really come to life.
Definitely. And your audience sees the authenticity come through that. They see that it's your style. It's so easy for you to talk about it and sell it, to wear it. It's sort of this 360 experience for your community, which obviously would garner way more sales than you just saying, this is what I love from their line.
Yeah. And you know, I think for as an influencer, it's an evolution. It's a journey. So you kind of start here marketing product, and as you learn, as you grow, then being able to design product. And now we're at the stage where being able to create my own product. And that was really what inspired Nēmah, our skincare brand, and is wanting, you know, for the last 10 years, we have all this data of what our customers want, what price points, what colors, what types of products. I'm having this very direct conversation with my community. And that was really the next big step for us, was entering in a space where, okay, now we're ready to create our own brand. And it was really that 10 years previous, and all the conversations and all the data that we've been having in these brand partnerships is what, you know, we were able to take that data into building out the skincare brand and really apply it and put it to the test in using all that data.
For you, like, what's the passion behind Nēmah, and like what was your non-negotiables for that brand?
I love that. I love both of those questions. My passion was, so for me, I've always looked for an avenue that would marry my background in nursing with this digital world. And for me, motherhood was the answer to that. When I became a mother, could not believe the disparity in these types of products. I couldn't find the products that I wanted. I couldn't find a stretch cream. And then when I had an emergency section, I couldn't find a scar treatment that was clean, that was effective, and that I could trust. And I was having the same conversations with other mothers online. They were asking me what I was using, and I was asking them what they were using. And that was when I first had the idea, and then we started doing the market research. So for me, it was just, I have such passion for caretaking, and even the chemistry and the science behind the formulating was really exciting. And motherhood was what propelled this whole idea. My non-negotiables were absolutely whitelisting and just putting my name on something. And I've said that from the beginning. I said that 5 years ago. Whatever I knew, I would have a brand of my own, and whatever it was, it would be authentic, and there would be truth, and there would be this level of expectation for it to be really great, and or else we wouldn't do it, right? Because there's a lot that out there that exists that is like that. And so we cut no corners, and by no corners I mean zero. It took a year longer to launch this brand than what we expected, a lot more money and resources, but we developed all of these formulas are developed by our chemist and our manufacturer, like every single ingredient we developed in Europe, which is a lot cleaner formulas. They have 1,300 more banned ingredients than we do here in America. And so every step of the way it was, and I do feel like in motherhood and in pregnancy, you just can't cut any corners. These have to be rigorously tested in the safest products. And that was the absolute, like we absolutely had to put the time and money behind it that it needed.
That's so awesome to hear. I mean, I'm a huge advocate for clean skincare and home cleaning supplies, and especially with young toddlers at home, as you know, you're like, they're small, and there's a toxic burden that we're all kind of faced to deal with every single day. But there are so many choices we can make to like remove this stuff from our homes and, give them the best fighting chance. And so why wouldn't we?
And it's crazy is women have access to these types of products in skincare and in beauty. But what was wild to me when I became a mother is that I couldn't find that in this category, which to me is that's when women really deserve it. And that's when women really want the cleanest products, and they'll spend the most on those products. And so that's why, that was our number one focus: clean, effective, science-backed formulas that women and that mothers could really trust.
Definitely. Well, let's circle back to Happily Grey, because you said that there was a reason behind why you named your blog Happily Grey. Your store is Happily Grey, the shop. Your new book is Happily Grey, stories, souvenirs, and everyday wonders from the life in between. Can you tell us what the background is on Happily Grey?
Yes, for sure. So a lot of people think this is like a nod to how I love like neutral tones.
Yeah. Monochromatic.
All gray. Yeah. No, it's not. And a lot of people are like, does this have something to do with her like ex-husband? Like, what is this? So gray for me was my, discovery in my 20s that life is not all black and white. And it doesn't always fit in a box, and it doesn't always make sense. And, growing up in a very small town and kind of entering this big, big world and all new perspectives when I started college, it just kind of hit me. And I was in this journey of realizing that life is actually gray, and there's stuff that's not going to make sense. And that was really beautiful to me, because there was a lot of freedom in that discovery. And it's where I felt the most creative. It's where I felt the most curious. And I just felt the most, like free of it. I didn't have to fit the mold. I could create my own path. And that was kind of where the journey for me really started, of trusting myself and connecting with myself, and just getting to know who I was. As a young girl, I grew up kind of going through it was wild how young I was when I started realizing, okay, I need to do this. Check, check, check. Like making forming in my head what I thought my life should look like and checking off my boxes as I went. And Happily Gray is really the discovery of that unpaved way of it not having to, us not having to go through life like that. And a lot of that came through nursing. I learned a lot of that when I became a nurse. Nurses sit between this gray area of life or death, especially critical care nurses where I work. And you learn a lot about the human spirit and the human body. And those 7 years really taught me a lot about this new gray space in my life. And I just fell in love with that new journey and venture and sense of discovery.
Well, I think you said it best. It's freedom, right? It's not right and wrong. It's not, it is that in between of being able to chart your own course and decide not to follow the checklist of, I will get married by 25 and buy my first house by 26 and have my first child by 27. I mean, I think back to when I was younger and I'm like, oh, I'll have all my kids before I'm 30 and I'll definitely have a house before then. And I'm like, well, I'll have the house. Maybe I'll move in before my 40th birthday. It's just crazy. And it's so sad too, because when you're living by that list, you aren't ever in the present moment. You're like, what's next? And that future living is all anxiety creating because you're constantly looking forward and trying to do something that actually isn't even physically possible yet for a lot of people. And it brings so much despair. I mean, I think you're so raw and honest in your book. And I want to go into some of those gray areas in your life. You've been through a divorce. You dealt with an eating disorder. Can we kind of talk about maybe where that control in your life and that checklist really created some of these decisions or disorders or pain and trauma in your life and how you move through it?
Sure. Yeah, for sure. I'll first start by saying that, that gray area involves trying things and making mistakes. And, now looking back and having done the work and having put in the time for all of the therapy, I will say that I'm so thankful for these moments in my life because I do think that's what shapes us and that's what gives us our color and really makes us who we are. And so that's what that gray represents when I think of going through divorce at a young age and thinking through all the journey of the eating disorder. It's that those are the experiences that have really shaped me and made me who I am today. And a lot of that for me started in my strive for perfectionism, which I talk a lot about in my book. That unrealistic, unhealthy, constantly criticizing and analyzing my body, specifically around my eating disorder or my performance. That was at a really early age. I was aware of that. And I have this, I'm a people pleaser. And I think that was a part of my journey is learning to trust myself and live, living for myself in a way of being centered and connected and knowing when to turn and trust myself. And so a lot of those first decisions in my journey with my eating disorder were kind of wrapped up in that strive for perfectionism, which is so unrealistic. And when I first started that work, that first step of opening up yourself of the possibility of failure, it's really scary. It's really terrifying. And it felt like skydiving for me, but that was really the first step of kind of peeling back the layers and starting that journey.
When you think back to the beginning of your eating disorder and when it potentially started, do you have like moments that you remember that were like key memories of feeling like this maybe doesn't feel normal? Or did you feel like you were like it was normal behavior?
For me, it felt like normal behavior because for me, it wasn't kind of a focus on my body. It was control. And that's part of the work is like you figure out what the root is. Because what I went into my therapy thinking the reason was behind all this was not. For me, it was connected to childhood moments and it was connected to control. And so I can vividly remember thinking I was making the right decisions to better my health. For me, it came out of this drive of wanting to be the best athlete, wanting to be the best in my class. And so I thought that, okay, I've got to eat healthy. And at a young age, I started restricting, thinking I was eating healthy, but I was also doing it without education and without, knowing the proper ways to take care of my body. And so, but that quickly spiraled, and a lot of eating disorders are deeply rooted in addiction, and that can come in many different forms. And so mine was kind of from the beginning, all about control and thinking I was making the right decision. But it wasn't, it was really controlling life situations at that time, and just trying as a little girl to to kind of navigate my world in the best that I could. So yeah, it actually had nothing to do with food at that time. It was just the one thing that I could control.
Do you find that control comes up for you a
Absolutely.
lot today?
Absolutely.
And how do you work through releasing control, allowing other people to help you, and kind of like scratch that itch without controlling food?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I say this like very bluntly in my book, though I'm in recovery, I still don't consider myself ever recovered. I think it's a lifelong journey of work, and there's new phases we go through and new cycles, but ultimately I have learned to love my body and to honor my body and to trust it. But you still have days where there are a struggle because that control creeps in, and that's a part of who I am. It's a part of my nature, my personality. And I think the awareness was really key. That's really key, of knowing this is who I am. And for me, a big part of that was accountability. And not really accountability around my eating disorder, but accountability around the root cause, which is control. And so you don't have to have an army of people to know your story and to, bear it all with, but even just one person in your life that you can trust. And accountability from the very beginning was huge. It's huge. Getting honest with yourself and accountability. And, I think motherhood has also taught me a lot about control. Because if there's any, yeah, right. You laugh because that journey has taught me more about control than anything. Because if there's anything we can't control, is that, like that whole, I mean, just starting from pregnancy, you can't control what necessarily you can help and aid and nurture, but it takes on its own path. So that's really and taught me a lot about myself and my tendencies.
Yeah, and I can only imagine it's something you talked about also in the book, is like your body changes throughout pregnancies. And as someone who's controlled your figure for a long time, how do you deal with the changes in your body over 10 months and longer? I mean, through postpartum, like who do you lean on? Do you, how does your husband support you? How do your friends support you, or your therapist? Like, what are the ways that you recognize and also love on your changing body?
Yeah, for sure. Well, and I think, what I found in pregnancy is there was something easier about the way my body was changing than when I wasn't pregnant, because there was this life-giving, like veil that kind of I felt embraced by. And so because I was really concerned about that going into my first pregnancy, that this was going to be really difficult because I day to day, the struggle is still there. And so but I will say there was like this, I don't know, this new power around that. I felt very empowered and a lot of gratitude that I could, because so for so long, I lived my life thinking that, my ultimate dream of being a mother probably wouldn't happen because of this eating disorder. So I had a deep sense of gratitude, and just really embraced that for what it was. But like I said, my husband for sure, accountability, because he does know it all. So he's aware even without me having to communicate. And that's how tight, and how much love and that has gone into that relationship of accountability, for sure. But it is hard. I think, with having a job that lies on social media and, perception and pictures and all of that, it's not easy to constantly, be okay with, the image and the look. And it's easy to get caught up in questioning all of it and feeling vulnerable in those moments. And so that to me that's what has been a little bit of a harder struggle than necessarily the body changes in motherhood, but really like the boundaries with having a job that's wrapped up in perception and social media, and also dealing with something like, body image and wanting to be authentic. And so that's really, where I think there's been more of a struggle there.
And rightfully so. I mean, it is like the actors that I work with that walk a red carpet. You're constantly on film, you're constantly, being photographed and having to put yourself out there. And for people that aren't spending the time to get to know you, to watch your stories, to follow along from a personal angle, there's so much judgment. And you can feel that. And not that anyone would say something mean. I mean, sometimes those things happen, but you can feel that. And so it's clear to me like why you would have that. And it's something that I have always joked around with some of my clients about, that it's that I'm so glad I don't have to really worry about that in the way that they do, because it's such a heavy burden.
Mm-hmm. For sure. Yeah. Well, and I think I do feel like the older I've gotten in the new chapters of life, with having done all this work and now motherhood, and kind of channeling my passion of having been a nurse and really learned how to take care of people, and creating this new skincare brand. I feel like through all of that work, I have tools now to deal with it. And it's really the women that I connect with the most are the ones that embrace the 360 approach to it all, that will really step into the vulnerability, step into the moments that aren't so pretty, that aren't so perfect. And that's really the heart of what this book is about. It's the other side of the story, because I think that's what's important that we're seeing on social media now. And it's the reason why I talked about my eating disorder in my book. It's the reason why I talked about my divorce, because it's not all a highlight reel. It's not all a pretty picture. And I think that sometimes the perception, I know I feel that way sometimes when I'm scrolling Instagram, but I think that was the point for me of this entire book, was to the full picture and really stepping into that vulnerability. I think sometimes on social media, it can be hard to do that. For me personally, I at times felt like stepping into that vulnerability was kind of just like shouting out, like just communicating on a one-way street. Whereas I really wanted a place for these stories to live in a meaningful way, so that they could hopefully create community. And so that's why I chose to share them in the book specifically, hoping that, on social media now that we'll have community and connection through that. But yeah, I think it's really important that we're all, showing both sides of it, showing that it's not always a pretty picture, and it's not always a highlight reel.
Well, that really resonates with me, honestly, because social media didn't exist until I was a senior in college. Facebook, I remember adding friends and liking photos in the athlete computer lounge, because we would crash our internet with Facebook. And it's funny for people now, these young kids are growing up with TikTok and Snapchat, and they're used to sharing their whole life and being super vulnerable and just saying everything that's going wrong in their lives. But when I think about my childhood and the way my parents raised me, they raised me to feel really grateful for everything I had, to not complain, to sort of like buck up and put in the effort
Yes.
and
Yeah.
not, and, and so it does when you start to share things that maybe really vulnerable stories that are not the highlight reel or kind of feel like you're complaining, I feel like it can feel awkward for our generation. And people just think you're not being authentic. Whereas here on the podcast, when I'm just having a conversation, I'm like, people will tune in if they want to tune in. And this is where I feel comfortable really sharing some of my personal stories. And so for you, that outlet was the book. It makes perfect sense. You've journaled for your whole life, and that's an easier place to share that side of your story.
Totally. Yeah. And hopefully that opens the door for more community and connection. Because I think when any of us step into vulnerability, that's what we're looking for. We're looking for acknowledgement, and we're hoping for community and connection through that. And that I hope that this book will serve to open those doors to then be able to talk about it. Because one thing I was sure of is I could not talk about it.
Yeah.
This had to be a part of the story. This had to be a part of, the conversations that I hope will follow. So, yeah, it's not easy, but it's really empowering when women do it. And I've been really empowered by watching close women around me do the same thing.
Yeah, it's really refreshing. And it was a beautiful read. Everything from learning how to fish to your favorite margarita. I mean, there's a lot of fun, light stuff in there, but then really, your real truth is there. And that is beautiful to see. And I feel like I got to know you a lot better through your book than I ever would have from your Instagram. So thank you so much for sending that along and letting me take a read. It was beautiful. What do you want the audience listening here today to know about you personally, or about your mission with your brand Happily Gray?
I hope there's a sense of discovery with it. I hope that women, a lot of times, like our Shop Happily Gray, our store, and kind of what we've built over these years, founded around fashion, sometimes can feel very surface, but I think there's a lot to the sense of discovery and curiosity. And that's what this journey really means for me. When I look past just, the brand physically, what it is, Happily Gray is really about discovering your true self and keeping your eyes wide open. Because there's so much more than what you're looking for, and staying curious and being okay with the unpaved way. And I hope that when women read this, they'll be inspired to kind of embark on that journey for themselves. I hope that they'll feel seen and understood. I hope that if they're in a darker time, that they won't feel so alone in this journey, because that was, that's what really pushed me to share the more vulnerable moments, so that women do feel like they that they're not the only ones that have been through these darker times. So yeah.
Well, it is nice to know that when you see the glossy cover or the pretty pictures, that there's been the struggle behind the photo and that you've made it through. It's inspiring, to say the least. And you're doing it all while raising a family. And it's proof that women can do it all. Really, truly, they can. So for the moms out there that have aspirations to have a big career, that have a big career, what advice do you have for them in regards to showing up for both passions?
It's a great question. Ask for help. It's a lesson that I had to learn, especially being someone that's controlling and wanting to do it all and wanting to feel like I can do it all. I had to learn that asking for help and that doesn't, I mean, I know everyone's resources look differently, but that could be a friend, that could be a 30-minute mentorship call, that could be a nanny, whatever it is, we can't do it all. It's just such an overwhelming, hard journey. And I think asking for help is what will allow you to be able to fuel up yourself, because you really can't give what you don't have. And so when we're not taking time to fuel ourselves, it's really hard to in return, be able to pursue our professional career and, give to our families. So I think that for me started by just saying like, hey, I can't do it all. I need help.
Mm-hmm. Are there moments and times that you've set aside for specifically your family or specifically your work where you feel like the best version of you is showing up? And how do you get and stay consistent with that?
So weekend time is our kid time. We are so busy during the week. My husband and I are business partners. We co-founded our skincare brand Nēmah together. And so we constantly, the weeks are just packed right now. And Saturdays and Sundays are our kid times. And we rarely will do anything socially right now, just because that's where we connect with our kids and we rest. Yeah. We rest. We connect with each other in more of a husband and wife manner, and we dedicate that time to our kids, and it's really, really important. And we had to make it was a conscious conversation when life picked up about a year ago, and it just got so busy. We consciously were like, Saturdays and Sundays, this is our family time. So
boundaries.
Yes, boundaries. Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, Mary, I can't thank you enough for being here and for sharing your story in your book and here on the podcast. You've built an amazing platform, 3 really successful businesses, and you're an inspiration. So where can people follow along? Where can they snag your skincare, shop the store, grab the book?
Thank you so much. I'm so thankful and happy to be here today. You can follow along at Mary Lawless Lee, which is my Instagram. It has a lot of updates on all that's happening. And then our skincare brand is Nēmah.com, Nemah, and it's pregnancy and postpartum skincare.
Love it. We'll put links to all of it in the show notes, along with where people can snag your book, Happily Gray. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much.